So good evening again, and thank you for coming to this debate between candidates for the 36th Connecticut State Assembly seat. I'd also like to thank Lee Rankin, the facilities manager for Region 4 Schools, and her staff for making this beautiful facility available to us. Always looks like they opened it yesterday. It's a great place. I'm Richard Conroy, director of the Essex Library, and with me is Tom Pietzo, director of the Rathbun Library in Haddam, and we'll be serving as moderators tonight. We're going to take turns asking the questions. With us this evening are Democrat Christine Palm and Republican Bob Segrist. The debate will last approximately 90 minutes. A minimum of 8 questions will be asked, and the candidates will answer additional questions if time allows. Excuse me. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to make an opening statement. The order in which they are speaking has been determined by a coin toss. They will also each have an opportunity to make a 3-minute closing statement in the reverse order in which the opening statements will be made. The same questions will be asked of both candidates. They will each have 3 minutes to answer the question, as well as 1 minute of rebuttal time for each question. Questions will not be accepted from the audience, and the candidates will not be permitted to ask questions of each other unless they do so during the course of their allotted time. You are permitted to take photographs if you'd like, but please do not use a flash. If you have a cell phone with you this evening, please turn it off or set it to vibrate rather than ring. And members of the audience are asked to remain quietly in their seats and be respectful of the speakers at all times. Anyone who does so will be asked to leave. So without further ado, we'll begin the debate with a recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by Bob's opening statement. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So we will begin with Bob Segrist with his opening statement.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you, Tom Pietzo. I want to thank them both for sponsoring this debate tonight. I also want to thank Christine Palm for participating in this debate. It has been my honor to be your state representative these past 2 years, representing our small town values and being your local voice in Hartford. In my view, a state representative should be the advocate for their district and make every possible effort to ensure that their district receives every cent of state aid it deserves. In the 36th, we have 4 towns that contribute a great deal to the state in tax dollars. We have not always received our fair share in that aid in return. Serving as state representative, I have learned that the role is not a soapbox on which people can freely espouse any and all thoughts they have on political issues that have broad national appeal. I love the Connecticut River Valley. I went to school here. I worked here. My family and friends live here. My first job was working at the Chart House in Chester, and I've had to work many jobs in this district to make ends meet. I'm invested in the community, a district I've lived in for 23 years. I know it is expensive to live in this state. That's why I first ran for this office in 2014. I'm going to do everything I can to ensure that young people, families, and retirees are able to afford to live in great communities like Chester, Deep River, Essex, and Haddam. We have vibrant communities, such as my hometown of Haddam, with active civic organizations that display unique pride and patriotism. Folks act responsibly when managing their family budgets, commit to helping others in need, and listens to concerns of all residents. I will always focus on what truly impacts your day-to-day lives, whether it's securing critical water infrastructure improvements in Tylerville, ensuring safe, clean drinking water for hundreds of residents in Haddam, or helping in securing much-needed upgrades to the Valley Shore 911 emergency communication system, or assisting the Deep River Housing Authority in obtaining funds for the recent 18-unit expansion at Kirtland Commons. The upcoming General Assembly session will yet again bring more difficult fiscal and budget challenges. I will confront those challenges as I have in the past, with honesty and transparency, fighting fiscal mismanagement and holding state government accountable. You deserve a better government. We all deserve a better Connecticut. I've always considered this seat the people's seat, and with your support on November 6th, I will continue to fight for common sense policies aimed at building a better future for all the residents of the 36th District. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. I'm going to ask that you please try to keep your applause down to a minimum, because the more applause time we have, the less question time we have. So next we have Christine.
Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight, especially my hardworking and enthusiastic supporters. Thank you, Bob, and our distinguished moderators. This is my first time running for office. It's a privilege even to have the opportunity to be considered to be your state representative and represent these 4 beautiful river towns. I served for 10 years in the state capitol, and during that time, I saw many bills fail because of lack of political will and internecine fighting among sitting legislators. I would like very much to be part of the solution to change that. I am also running for office to protect what is sacred and beautiful about where we live, and to block deleterious and harmful policies that erode our quality of life here in the 36th and would undermine democracy across the state. So on that note, now that we have joined in saying the Pledge of Allegiance together, I would like to tell you what it means to me. The last line speaks of liberty and justice for all. As a candidate, I think every single day about who all is. To me, it means economic justice for all the working families in our district who are hampered by stagnant wages. It includes our senior citizens who are watching with great trepidation as their Social Security and Medicare benefits are imperiled. It means everyone with a pre-existing condition who, under the Affordable Care Act offered by the exchange here in Connecticut, now is worried about seeing those benefits eroded. The liberty and justice is denied to children who are afraid every day to go to school because cowards in Congress refuse to stand up to the gun lobby. It includes people of color who are incarcerated at wildly disproportionate rates, and members of the LGBTQ community who fear being attacked for who they are and whom they love. Liberty and justice for all must be extended to families at the borders, to those facing deportation, and to every veteran who feels demoralized and overlooked. It means all of the young people saddled with college debt that may well prevent them from getting an economic toehold. And it means women who suffer sexual harassment only to be re-traumatized when they watch the nominee for Supreme Court and our president mock them. So to me, all means all of us. And rather than claim to be an indivisible nation, I think it is time we were honest and acknowledge that we are in fact a deeply divided nation and a deeply divided state. To heal this divide, I believe we need 3 kinds of legislation: that which protects what is good by codifying it into law, that which undoes harmful existing policies, and that which creates new opportunity. I'm running because despite the gridlock and broken promises, I still believe in government's ability to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, please try to keep the applause to a minimum. And the first question this evening will go to Christine. No, I'm sorry, to Bob. Yeah, got that backwards. Has your candidacy been endorsed by any prominent individuals or organizations? And if so, what do those endorsements mean to you?
Thank you, Richard, and thank you, Tom, for the question. They have been endorsed by a few. The Connecticut Realtors Association has endorsed my candidacy. The Connecticut Business and Industry Association has endorsed my candidacy, as well as the Independent Party has endorsed my candidacy. They endorsed us, or me, I think about a month or so ago. But I don't take endorsements, I take them pretty lightly. I've always said, you know, and I've probably heard it before, but the most important endorsement is the endorsement by the people, because those are the ones that really make it matter. When you're up in Hartford, you know, when you're up in Hartford, when I'm up in Hartford, and there's a bill that's being discussed, whether it's in committee or on the floor of the House, there's two buttons, a red button and a green button. And what I think about are the people back in this district who I care about, who are hurting when I go door knocking and listen to people and they say it's too expensive to live here. Those are the people that I care about, and that's the endorsement that I am most proud to have.
Thank you. Christine, same question?
Well, I agree with Bob that the most important endorsement is your vote, but I respectfully disagree about the value of endorsements from experts in their fields. And I am proud to say that among the endorsements I've received were the American Federation of Teachers, the Connecticut Education Association, which I was made an honor roll distinction candidate, the National Association of National Association of Social Workers, Firemen's Union, the Police Union, and several labor unions, AFSCME, AFL-CIO. I am cross-endorsed by the Working Families Party, so my name will appear on that line as well. And among women's groups, I'm endorsed by NARAL, Connecticut Now, and Planned Parenthood. Gun safety advocacy is important to me, and I was given an A rating by Connecticut Against Gun Violence. And I will wrap up by saying that 3 men I respect a great deal and who I think have been extraordinary leaders have also endorsed me. Our Congressman Joe Courtney, Senator Chris Murphy, and a fellow named Barack Obama. Thank you.
Thank you. Bob, you have a minute to respond.
Yes, thank you. So clearly you won the endorsements. So congratulations. I guess I can't be getting endorsed by President Obama, although I'm not interested in having the current president endorse me. Again, that's fine. If you're, police unions endorsed you, the firemen endorsed you, that's great. I serve on the Public Service and Safety Security Committee, and I'm proud to have their back every single day. So endorsements to me, again, at the end of the day, we have to work together. And it's not about, for me, it's not about getting big fancy endorsements. I'm not saying it is with you, but for me, it's not. It's about the people of this district, and that's what I care about.
Would you care to respond, Ms. Christine? You
No,
get another
that's
minute.
fine. I'll let it lie there.
Okay, next question, Tom will be asking.
Okay, good evening. Recreational use of marijuana is now legal to one extent or another in the states of Massachusetts, Vermont, and Maine. A recent poll of Connecticut residents found that they favored legalization in our state by a 57 to 39% margin. Has the time come for Connecticut to legalize recreational marijuana? And if so, how should that be done? That's Bob.
I go first?
No, Christine.
Yes. Yes, I am in favor of recreational marijuana legalization. I think decriminalization was a very good start. I believe that, as with any substance, there have to be protections, especially for children. But I happen to come from a family where alcoholism is rampant. And alcohol is legal. It has been legal for a very long time. Children still find a way to poison themselves with it. I think it is folly that we are missing out on revenue from this potential source when states all around us have it. And I think it's also very important that we protect the medical marijuana that has helped so many people with a whole range of conditions.
Thank you. Bob, would you have a response?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. This question's actually come up the first time I ran in 2014, in 2016, and not surprisingly today. And previously, I had, to be completely honest, was kind of a 50-50 on it. I know people who smoke pot, to be honest with you, and they're not bad people. But I think one of my concerns, so to be honest with you, I'm going to come out right now and say that I do support it. So it took me a while to think about it and come around about it, but I do think very strongly that, for one, it should not be done because of a revenue gain. I think it should be done as almost like a fundamental thing. Do I think it should be taxed? Yes. Do I think it should be heavily regulated? Yes. I also believe firmly that of course, the devil's in the details. You have to look at what's in the bill. But I think firmly that small towns should not be mandated to have dispensaries or have places that sell pot. I think that should be done on the local level. And I think if working in Hartford, across party lines, if we can come to an agreement that's saying, yes, we could legalize this drug, but we're not going to force Chester or Deep River or any of our small towns to sell it. So it would basically give small towns the right to refuse it. But ultimately, the answer to your question is yes. At this point, I have come around and will support some form of recreational marijuana. And I do want to note that I am concerned about our youth and impact. So I think, again, I support it, but we have to work out some kind of a bill that would work, I think, for both sides, and I think it would be fair. So.
Anything to add, Christine?
I agree with what Bob said. I just wanted to add 3 other points. One is that I think it would really, legalizing would really reduce black market activity. And I think we need to have a concomitant program for the release of people who have been incarcerated as a result of selling small amounts when they have no other crime as well. And I think we need to also be prepared for counseling and make sure that we don't criminalize immediately for infractions while driving while stoned, for example, or going over the allotted amount that you can legally buy and sell. And I do think we need to be able to have a counseling provision built into any law.
Any final thoughts, Bob?
I agree. I think we're almost on the same page with that. I think that goes back to what I was saying when it comes to working out the details. You know, if you're pulled over, you know, how can the police officers judge if you're high or not? I think those are the kinds of things that we have to look into. Those are the devils in the details that I say, the specifics that we have to work out. But otherwise, I would be in favor of it.
Thank you.
Okay, it's back to me, and excuse me, first respondent this time around is Bob. And the question is, health insurance coverage is a major concern for many small businesses and individuals who simply can't afford it. The plans available through Access Health CT to those who don't have insurance through their employer are short-term, have very high deductibles, and are repriced every year. What can be done to change Access Health CT in order to make healthcare more affordable?
Thank you for the question, Richard. So this is a big topic, big issue for people, and I understand completely. I talk to people all the time that can't afford health insurance. I was just on the phone with a constituent last week who doesn't have health insurance because he can't afford it. He runs his own business. He's an electrician. And he says, you know, Bob, I can't afford this. You know, what can we do? And I'm almost speechless sometimes because, you know, part of me says I think we should work a little bit with the private sector, maybe a private quasi-government kind of a deal. I think pre-existing conditions is something that I personally have always were in favor of. As someone who's had melanoma when I was, I think, 26 years old, it's a bit scary to think that, you know, not having pre-existing something like that you would get kicked or booted from an insurance policy is outrageous. But I think the healthcare problem is something that has been going on for years. Costs are rising. My own mother, for example, could not have health insurance. She just recently got on it from Medicare because she's at that age now. But it's something that we need to work out, that we need to figure out, because a lot of our young kids, people my age, 35 years old, can't afford it. So we have to work together. Do I have the exact answer to it? No. Who does? I'm not sure. But we need to fight that. We needed to work together to figure out a plan that's affordable for people. You have such high deductibles. You know, you go on Access Health CT, the deductible's so high, and the coverage is not good. So it could be good for some people. Maybe if you're in a lower income bracket, maybe it works. I don't know. But people from, I know, my age and older, it's definitely a problem that we have to try to fix.
I believe the answer is universal health care and expanded Medicare for all. We are the only industrialized nation that doesn't seem to be able to get a handle on what to do with our insurance problems, and Other nations manage to work it out. I think we can too. And while I agree with Bob about the exorbitant costs, and one more thing we have in common, I too have had cancer. I had lymphoma and was very ill for quite a long time. And if it hadn't been for the fact that I was able to get a job with coverage, I'm not sure I would have made it. And I don't say that to be dramatic. I think we all know people who've been in that boat. Someone very dear to me actually had to give back $3,000 to his employer because he was made too much money to be on the Husky A, which is a very good program here in Connecticut. So I think the simple answer is to make a single payer system, and I have some supporters who are physicians who support that idea, that Medicare works very well for the most part. We need to make it available to everybody.
I think, again, healthcare costs are too high. Show me how it'll work. If when you talk to people and they say, I can't afford health insurance because it's too expensive, deductibles are too high, show me how it works. I'm all for something. I would be all for something that makes sense. If it brings costs down and people get good health insurance, I'm for it. But right now, that's not happening, and we need to work together to figure something out. As Republican or Democrat, I don't care what party you're from, we need to figure something out to get people covered.
I would add only that one of the problems in driving up those costs is executive compensation for people who run these insurance companies, and of course the fact that Big Pharma is in league with far too many people nationally, and it's very hard to fight that when politicians accept money from those donors.
Okay. Back to Tom.
Thank you. The minimum wage in Connecticut is $10.10 per hour. That amounts to about $21,000 a year for a full-time work week, which is far below the average annual household income in Connecticut of over $60,000 per year. There have been calls to raise the minimum wage to $15 per hour. What is your position on this issue? And Bob will begin.
Thank you, Tom.
Christine.
Working for a small business.
Sorry. It's Christine first.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
And here it is, politics in action, duking it out right in front of you. Thank you, Bob. Yes, I am in favor of raising the minimum wage. When I was at the Permanent Commission on the Status of Women, which was an independent arm of the General Assembly established in 1973, it was abolished 2 years ago because of the budget. It was merged with other agencies. We did a very in-depth study of the minimum wage, the actual real minimum wage needed in Connecticut by family demographic groupings. In other words, we used UConn's model of the 5 Connecticut's, which doesn't go by geography, but it goes by type of region, urban core, rural, et cetera. The lowest minimum wage anywhere in Connecticut is $17 an hour. That's the lowest wage actually that can support the basic necessities. And it ranges all the way up to $46 an hour in parts of Fairfield County. And again, that depends on the number of earners in the household, the number of children, the amount that you have to commute, all these various metrics. But that is really the realistic range, is 17 to 46 to live in Connecticut. So even at $15, we're already grossly pricing ourselves out. I think it's very, very important to remember that the working poor, the people who are actually making minimum wage jobs, there is a mythology that most of those are young kids who are in high school and they don't really need the money and they're doing it so that they can buy new cell phones. The reality is that the average person making minimum wages in Connecticut is a middle-aged woman, often the sole provider for children. Women are also the greatest economic decision makers in dual income families. We make most of the purchasing decisions. So raising the minimum wage would stimulate the economy by giving more people disposable income, not only for the basic costs of living, transportation, housing, shelter, taxes, healthcare. But for the kinds of purchases that drive an economy, especially in our region where tourism is so big, more people with a higher minimum wage could actually go on vacation once in a while.
Now, Bob.
Not much. Thank you. Sorry about that. So, as I said earlier, working for a small business, I see how it's tough for them to pay their employees. And do we want people to do better and do well? Absolutely. But for I think a 10-10 minimum wage was passed a few years back. Now you're looking at a $15 minimum wage. Talked about any living wage is anywhere between $17 and $40-something, depending on where you live in Connecticut. I've heard numbers around $25. I would just ask where can we get? How can that help businesses, thrive? And I see a lot of local businesses owners in the audience right now that run small businesses, and I can almost assure you right now that if we mandate them to pay $15 an hour or $17 an hour or $25 an hour, that they're going to have to either lay off employees or shut their doors. And if they shut their doors, then there's no jobs. In a great economy, if things were great, if we weren't facing a $5 billion deficit next year, if the Connecticut economy was booming, sure, I wouldn't be opposed to having cost of living wage adjustments, but as of right now, I don't see it happening, not in the state of Connecticut, not the way the budget is. We have some major problems next year that we have to face. We were faced with cutting Medicare savings program that we fixed this past session, cuts to our schools, and so, you want to have a discussion of a minimum wage, it's fine, but I think we should do it realistically, and I think you should look at the numbers, and if the numbers don't make sense, then you go back to the drawing board. But right now, I don't think we could afford it. And I talk to small businesses all the time. There's a ton of small businesses in the 36th. And the last thing that I would want to do is support any bill that would close people's doors and then they don't have jobs. And so that's my concern with the minimum wage increase to $15 an hour.
Thank you. Anything to add in 1 minute, Christine?
One of the highest burdens on businesses, large and small, is the retraining of new employees. And when people leave because of low wages, the burden is on the employer to retrain new people. We bemoan the fact that we are losing young people here in Connecticut, that our wage stagnation is tremendous, and that young people want to go where jobs will offer a good quality of life. Again, it's about investing in our future, investing in our economy, investing in our young people. You cannot cut your way to prosperity, and you cannot slash and burn your way to stability. And the narrative that we don't ever have the money for what matters is one that I reject. I think that any investment bears fruit over time. So if people are paid a living wage, they will be more likely to stay, more likely to be loyal to those employers, and more likely to put down roots and buy homes and rent apartments and all the things that we say we worry about losing, but then we don't want to do anything to help. The other piece that needs to be part of the minimum wage conversation is family-friendly workplace policies like predictable schedules. When people show up for work at a low-wage job and then they're sent home because there's nobody in the restaurant that day, that harms that family.
Going to have to wrap it up, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, time's up?
You're over your time.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll stop there.
Bob, I'll give you an extra minute.
No, that's, I mean, again, who doesn't agree with investments? It doesn't matter what party you're from. Of course, I think most of us or all of us would agree to invest in our future. But in regards to the minimum wage, again, when I talk to small business owners and they can't afford it, they're having problems as it is now that they can't stay in the state. I just don't think putting an extra burden on them, employers that give people the opportunity to work, to make money, to pay their bills, to invest in their future. I don't think we should be taking that away from them.
Okay, my turn again. And again, this goes to Bob first. Do you believe that climate change is caused by humans is occurring, and if so, what can be done at the state level to help address it?
an emphatic yes. I do believe that climate change is going on. I think it's something that we all have to, I guess, another thing about working together. On the state level, I think we could try to help the environment as much as we can. Been a strong proponent of the environment, but I think emissions don't help. Gas emissions doesn't help. I think we need to make some changes, probably more on the federal level. But do I think climate change is real? Yes, and I think that that's an investment that I think we should all kind of believe in, because it is our Earth. It's our Earth, and we need to invest in it. So, thank you.
Christine? Yeah.
Yes, of course it's real. I believe some steps, concrete steps that we could take here in the state, one of which we've already done, which is to opt back into the state equivalent of the Paris Climate Accord, which our nation opted out of. I think we need to protect our barriers along the Connecticut shoreline, including preventing erosion. We have to develop our light rail system better so that there are fewer cars. And I believe in the carbon tax credit, so that I think companies should be taxed for their carbon emissions, and they could buy them back and then use them for environmental causes. If we deregulated the electric grid, right now there's a system where people who have solar powers on their homes and they produce excess energy, that excess goes back to the Eversource or the power company. I believe that should be distributed to the people so that their own costs would come down, and it would encourage people to use green energy. And I believe that we should outlaw plastic bags. I've been carrying my tote bags, much to the hilarity of my family, since I was very, very young. And I think other states and other countries have done it. We need to get rid of plastic bags. Those are just some ideas to start.
Bob?
I agree when it comes to helping our shoreline. That's very important. And I think, again, we need to be stewards of our environment. I also cannot stand using plastic bags. Ask my girlfriend Amy. We have a ton of reusable bags that we use when we go grocery shopping. But again, I think we all need to work together. This is our Earth. This is our environment. This is our Connecticut River Valley. These are our state parks. We live in a beautiful area, and we have to keep it clean and maintain that beautiful environment that we live in.
The last word, Christine?
Yes, one more idea that I forgot to mention. I would, if elected, I would work with the Attorney General of Connecticut to sue upwind states who pollute and both upriver and upwind from us, and so that effluent comes down. I think that neighboring states need to be held accountable as well, and we can use the power of the state's attorney to do that.
Okay. The Me Too and Time's Up movements are examples of the ways that women are currently speaking out about sexual harassment and abuse. What can be done at the state level to help foster greater respect for women? Christine, if you could begin.
Well, this is a subject very near and dear to my heart. In February, I founded my own company based on my 10 years of experience in the state, and that is to give training to prevent sexual harassment in the workplace. I work with companies, nonprofits, and educational institutions to protect the company assets and their employees from the devastating effects of sexual harassment. The legislature almost passed a wonderful bill last year, and it fell short. It passed one house and didn't pass in the other. But here in Connecticut, we actually have stronger sexual harassment laws than many states. They kick in sooner. If you have a company of 50 or more employees, you need to train your managers. And I believe the Time's Up Act would have lowered that threshold. I think it's terribly important to remember that it hurts businesses' bottom line. When we talk about human rights issues or gender-based discrimination, there is always an economic cost to them. And the exorbitant lawsuits levied against companies that are sued by complainants, it can be devastating to a company. So I believe very much in the Me Too movement. I think it's very important that we train employees, and I also believe it should start very early in schools. We live in a time when there has been a lot of notice given to this, and there is already a predictable backlash that men are unfairly accused. I think if we train our young men on how not to become abusive, we don't need to do as much training of our young women about how to protect themselves. It takes all genders to actually solve this problem.
Bob?
Thank you. I think we have to be one on this, and we need to treat people with respect. And I think what's happening now on the national level is not what's best of us. It's not who we are. And yeah, we could pass laws to try to prevent it, and I'm all for that. But I think at the end of the day, we need to have respect for each other, respect for each other, for women, for men, whether you're homosexual or bisexual or transgender, no matter what it is, we are all one. We are all human beings. And I think that's, for me at least, in my heart, that's the most important thing. And people who break the law, people who sexually harass people should be punished. They should go to jail. It's not right what's going on in this country right now, and it sickens me almost every day to my stomach. But we need to work together. We need to be respectful of each other no matter what, and respect people's bodies and people's beliefs. And I think only then could we as a society start maybe turning the tide, getting there, not facing such horrible violence, sexual harassment against women. It just absolutely appalls me. And I have personal stories that I won't get into of people that are very near and dear to my heart that have been sexually harassed in the past. So it's something that's very important to me as well. And I am willing to work with any legislator up in Hartford to get any future legislation passed if it will help. But ultimately, as a society right now, I want to say we need to respect one another. I think that's where a good start, or at least to go from there.
Christine, final thought?
One of the privileges I had when I was in state service as a policy analyst was helping to draft legislation to protect women from sexual violence in its most benign forms and its most severe forms. And some of the bills that I was very pleased to be able to work on, all of which passed, were the expediting of rape evidence kits, removing parental rights away from rapists, the affirmative consent bill on college campus, the so-called Yes Means Yes bill. These are just a few of the bills that I researched and helped draft language for, which legislators like Bob actually voted on. And I would like to be able to be on the policy-making side rather than the advising side. That's why I'm running.
Please hold your applause.
Last words, Bob?
Yeah, and I thank Christine for her work in Hartford on those issues, and I was happy to co-sponsor Senate Bill 17, which is the sexual assault evidence collection kit. It came through my committee. I co-sponsored it. I'm proud to have supported that in the House, voted for it in the House. So there's things like that working together I think could help us as a society.
Thank you. Okay, next question goes to Bob first. The arts are an important economic driver in the 36th district. What should the state be doing to support the arts, and can you think of any initiatives that should be pursued to make that happen?
So I love the arts. I think it's a good thing to get involved in. I would absolutely support anything down the road that comes across the pipe that comes along with the arts. I think also it could even keep people out of trouble, to be honest with you. If you're in a play or painting, one of my good friends is a big painter. So I think if if the money's, of course, we're facing a $5 billion deficit, but I think the arts does help our children. I think it's something, as Christine has talked about earlier, investing I think the arts is an investment. I think for the future, I think it will help our younger kids. So I think it's a good thing, and if there's enough money there, we should put more money into the arts, because I think it's just a fantastic investment for a community, especially for the 36th district. It's just, I think it'd be great for kids at Valley and HK to continue to be invested in the arts. I think it's great for our community.
Please hold your comments too, please. Christine, same question.
I taught for 10 years at the Greater Hartford Academy of the Arts in Hartford, and I did see firsthand everything that Bob just said about the ability of the arts to transform kids' lives. One of the few schools in Connecticut, actually, whose art program was as good as what we had at the Academy is here in Valley, and that was one of the reasons that we chose to have our youngest son attend Valley. So I believe wholeheartedly in that. What I decry is that they are often among the first things cut. They are seen as extraneous, and they are not. They are fundamental to a civil society, and they teach the kind of big thinking skills that we need in any field. So one of the things that I would suggest is perhaps diverting some of the money that is currently being spent in the First Five program, which was enacted in 2011. It's $322 million that is going currently to large corporations. Certainly some of that could be sent to arts programs in the schools, and they could partner with local nonprofits and teach a cross curriculum with taking advantage of the local arts. Here in the 36th district, we have any number of museums and cultural opportunities for our kids. Rather than just have one field trip a year, to one of them, I think they could be incorporated into a curriculum if the schools had a little bit more money. And I would much rather see that money go to schools for the arts than to GE and Alexion and companies that just pick up and leave anyway.
Bob.
Again, I think it's an investment in our community, and I played Winthrop Peru in The Music Man, so thought that was kind of cool. I played Winthrop Peru in The Music Man.
Christine, last thoughts?
No, that's all right.
Okay,
It was
thank
actually
you.
a good play.
Connecticut faces many problems, including a sluggish economy, crumbling infrastructure, and a perception that state government is inefficient. What do you think is the most significant problem facing our state now, needing the most urgent attention, and what would you like to see done to address that problem?
Do I go first? So this is the kernel of what is on most people's minds, and I only have 3 minutes, so I'm going to talk very fast. Our unfunded pension mandate is a real problem. I was the communications director for the state treasury. The state treasurer has been warning people about this for decades. It is a legal contractual obligation that we must fulfill. What we need to remember when we talk about all of these fictitious state workers that are getting exorbitant pensions is that only the Tier 1 people get those pensions. Those are the employees hired a long time ago. The recent tiers down to 2, 2A, 3, and 4, there is almost no incentive for young people to take those government jobs. It's an unfortunate fact that over time it will just dissipate, but right now it's like negative compound interest, and we're stuck with it. Getting back to my point earlier about not cutting our way to prosperity, this is where we have to invest in our economy. So one example that I would like to see, I mentioned the First Five, which was that program that is giving $322 million to 15 companies. I would much rather see that money broken up in the reverse and give a few $100,000 to several hundred startups. If you are a young entrepreneur or an innovative person, it's like buying a house. The biggest problem is coming up with the down payment, right? So if you have a wonderful idea and you're a startup and you want to stay in Connecticut and you have a wonderful product, the hardest part is getting access to credit and pulling together that seed money. I would rather see us invest in young, new startup companies throughout the state. And one idea I had was that the state could buy for $1 all of the abandoned factories from every municipality. Every one of our 169 towns, including the 4 that Bob and I hope to represent, have abandoned mills or factories. The state takes those off the burden of the municipalities, and then gives it for 5 years rent-free to these innovative startups with seed money that they give instead of giving it to GE and Aetna, with the proviso that those people stay in Connecticut for 5 years, they hire 50% of their workers locally, they draw 50% from out of state because we need to rebuild our working class, and that there would be a provision for affordable housing, because these things are all interconnected. You cannot improve the economy if nobody can afford to live here for a job. So to me, it's a web of investment in innovation, in our infrastructure that we have. We have all these abandoned, beautiful, historic buildings that are sitting idle. And I would much rather see that go than $21 million to Cigna and $26 million to NBC Sports. These are just a few of the payouts that we have given so people won't leave the state. Let's reward the people who want to be here. 2 seconds, 1 second.
Good job.
Right on the mark.
Bob?
Thank you, Tom. Of course, as many as you know, we have major fiscal problems in this state. We're facing a roughly $5 billion deficit next year, and we really need to start making tough decisions real quick. Last session, we passed a spending cap. We also passed a bonding cap, which are at least two things that are that will help at least in the future to get the ball kind of rolling in the right direction. I think there is a vast amount of wasteful spending up in Hartford. I think there's a $20 million cappuccino machine that was paid for in one of the agencies. When we talk about investment, I think that almost trickles down to our communities. If Hartford is spending wisely, and they have, we're not running deficits up there, then we could make investments in the community. We were lucky to save 9-town transit. That wasn't just me, that was a bunch of legislators, Republican and Democrat. I think that, for an example, is an investment in our infrastructure. I think the affordable housing in Deep River for seniors with an 18-unit expansion was almost cut. It was almost gone. And we worked hard. I worked very hard with Joanne Hurrigan, among others, to get that through. Bottom line, we need to start treating money up in Hartford, taxpayers' money, like it's yours and not like it's theirs. Because when you're up there in Hartford, you see it. And a lot of people don't respect that. And then you get in the holes that we're in. Connecticut lags behind. It's not because I'm knocking Connecticut. It's not because I'm dissing Connecticut. I love Connecticut, and that's the reason why I'm still here, right? I love this place because I love Connecticut, and that's why I'm not leaving. But we need to really start reining in our spending, really getting our priorities under control, because it's way out of whack. It's not right. It's not their money. It's your money, and I think that is an investment in itself for our future.
Another minute on this topic, Christine?
Yes, I think that to turn our economy around, again, rather than just look at where we can cut, and some things definitely need to be cut. I agree with Bob. There is some waste, there is bloat. Of course, there are always ways to save. But Republicans are very eager and consistent in comparing state government to family budgets. The government is not a family. It is there to protect all of the people. And if this model were true, that it were a family, think about your own budget. Yes, you can decide not to buy a new car. You can not eat out as often. You can cut and cut and cut. But down to a certain point, you can't cut any further. You cannot call up your mortgage company and say, I only feel like paying half of it this month. Is that okay with you? You can't not pay your taxes. And so people are forced to live without health care and other things, not to mention assets for the future. Nobody is saving any money. So cutting is great down to a point, and you cut to the bare bone, and then you have to start building back up.
Last words, Bob.
Well, I think then maybe that's the problem. Maybe Hartford should start treating that money as if it was a family, maybe a family that lives in the 36th district that could barely make ends meet, that work 2 or 3 jobs to pay for the bills, to put food on the table. I think maybe that's something Hartford should change.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Next question goes to Bob first. Connecticut has some of the most restrictive gun laws in the country. Are you satisfied with the current legislation in place, or would you prefer that it be changed? And if so, in what way?
Thank you, Richard. Connecticut does have probably, if not the most toughest gun laws in the nation. I think, you know, what happened, unfortunately, in Newtown was a just unfortunate, horrifying, upsettingly sad tragedy. And I think, you know, I think we need to, as a society, really work together and think of different ways that we could, you know, not use a gun in a way that would obviously would kill someone. I think there are a lot of people that I know who are hunters that respect the Second Amendment, and I think they have rights that need to be preserved. I also think that I think we are very weak, in my opinion, very weak on mental health laws in regards to using guns, and I think that it's all well and good if you want to talk about a bump stock ban or you know, any kind of a ban, but I think we have not yet, still, years later, have addressed mental health issues, and I think money should be invested in that, because that's, you know, people have problems, and people have problems, it happens. We need to help them because they need help, and I think they're crying for help and they don't know where to go. So I think that's something that we should change on the state level, or at least look more into on the state level. I think it's imperative for our future. I have a 3-year-old son. I don't want him to go to school one day and then not come home. So I'm very sensitive to that. And I think, again, ultimately, mental health issues need to be addressed big time, I think, in the state.
Thank you, Christine.
Well, here's where Bob and I may part ways a little bit, because I think that it takes a lot more than mental health services, which of course I'm in favor of, but so often the people who commit these atrocities don't appear on the radar until it's too late. And I find it a very cruel irony that we always talk about mental health funding, which is magically available in times of mass murder, but never else. It's not there for vets who have PTSD. It's not there for people who have addiction issues. It's not there for survivors of sexual assault, but it's always allegedly there for people with guns. I believe really firmly in strong legislation. I think that we should do away with the concealed carry reciprocity law. We should ban bump stocks. We absolutely need to crack down on ghost guns, which are the untraceable ones, because the I-95 corridor brings all those guns from the south right up through New England and into New York. And I think that we should have very, very harsh penalties for that. I believe in universal background checks. Essentially, I believe in the strictest gun laws possible, and I firmly believe in responsible gun owners' right to protect themselves, to protect their farms, to shoot coyotes who are attacking their chickens, and I believe in hunters' rights to responsibly use a gun to kill a duck or whatever they want to do. There is no place in civil society for high-capacity magazines or any device that turns a gun into a rapid-fire murder machine, and we can get rid of those.
Please hold your applause. Time up, Bob? Okay, Bob?
You done? You have time left, okay. Yeah, and I think most people I talk to wouldn't be upset to have a background check. I think that's normal, I think that's fine. I voted for the bump stock ban. I know that upset probably people that I know that are members of the CCDL, but, you know, look, I think there could be sensible gun legislation that we could agree on. But with that being said, I think, you know, there should be definitely an investment and a look into people with mental health issues. And I think when I talk about wasteful spending and a $20,000 cappuccino machine, I think, yeah, you could take that money and you could put it into mental health. And I think that it's a no-brainer to me. So I think mental health is a big component of gun legislation, and I think it would go a very long way in saving people's lives in the future.
Christine?
I think, Bob, you are to credit for voting that way on that bill. and I certainly would have as well had I been in office. I wanted to mention that another bill that I worked on and researched and helped push through was the removal of firearms from a home in which there's domestic violence during an ex parte or temporary restraining order. And that will save dozens and dozens of lives because, as I think everybody knows by now, a woman is most at risk of being killed, 7 times more likely to be killed if there's a firearm in the home, and far more at risk for being killed in the first few days after announcing that she will leave or making plans to take the kids and leave. And prior to the last 2 legislative sessions ago, in Connecticut, a judge did not have the discretion to take away that gun while the victim was waiting for the permanent restraining order to come through. So I was very pleased to have been instrumental in researching and writing that bill language, and it did pass. And I think legislation exists to protect us.
Thank you.
So our final question tonight, going to Christine first. You're presumably running for office because you care about this district and state. What is the best thing about the state of Connecticut?
I didn't expect that question. The best thing about the state of Connecticut, we are nutmeggers. I grew up in Connecticut, and I remember a time when Connecticut was a place that had a beautifully diversified economy that was pretty much 5 parts: defense, tourism, insurance, manufacturing, both light, and heavy, and insurance. I say that, and we've fallen away from that. I have lived here all my life. My children live here, most of them. I love the spirit of Connecticut. I love our shoreline. I love the beauty. I think Bob would join me probably in all of these things. I love New England to my core. There's no place I'd rather live. Is it perfect? No. But I think there's a very wonderful ethos in Connecticut of what we used to call Yankee ingenuity, but a sense of a pride and a spirit. There's no place more beautiful, and I think that when you grow up in Connecticut and then you have children in Connecticut, there is this sense of, yes, we've all been here together. There's 6 degrees of separation among all of us, and that might be stifling to some. I find it beautiful, and I think it's part of the legacy of growing up here, and I'd like to see us strengthen that for everybody, not just those of us fortunate enough to be able to live here and grow up here.
Bob?
Thank you, Richard and Tom. Yeah, I mean, we're all Yankees, right? What a great state we are. It's a great state. I grew up in East Berlin, moved down here when I was 12, graduated from HK. First job was at the Chart House. We live in a beautiful district, a beautiful state. Like Christine said, we have beautiful beaches, the beautiful Connecticut River Valley. I just, who doesn't love this state? So many good things about the state. I think probably the best thing about this state are the people in it, especially in our area, because there's a bunch of tenacious people out there, I can see them right now, that care, that love their state, no matter what political party you're from. And it's just a beautiful place to live in. The 4 seasons. You have fall, you have winter, you have hot summers that I'm out cutting grass, getting dirty, landscaping. So yeah, I think we all know what great places there are. We're not far from Boston. We're not far from New York. So it's just a beautiful state, and I'm happy to be here.
Anything you want to rebut on that?
No, I believe Bob that he's happy to live here. I have no desire to rebut
We agree.
that.
All right, well, as Tom mentioned, that was our last question, but I think I'd just like to add on what you folks just had to say, which is to say that I thank both of you for being such civil and thoughtful candidates. I think that the state of Connecticut could, at least in this district, can show the folks at the national level how it is to have a civil debate and disagree and be intelligent about it. So, thank you very much for that. So we'll now be moving on to the closing statements, and Christine will be making the first of those, if I get my timer. I'm giving her 17 hours. I think 3 minutes will do, though.
Okay,
Go for
thank
it.
you. Thank you, everybody, for your attention, and thank you, Bob, for your thoughtfulness. My husband and I moved here 7 years ago from Hartford because we were drawn by all the things that I just mentioned. We raised 4 sons in Hartford, and the youngest of them came with us. We had 169 choices of where to move, and we chose Chester. We moved both our mothers to Haddam. We do our shopping in Deep River. We go to Essex to, walk on the beautiful trails. I want to do more than live here. I want to give back to it. I want to listen to you and to work with our local officials and to advocate for you at the Capitol. I've been a newspaper reporter, so facts matter to me. Accountability in government is terribly important to me. I mentioned that I was a high school teacher, so I will fight for school excellence. And I have worked in both executive and legislative branches of government, so I do know how bills get made and why they fail. From knocking on thousands of doors this summer, I've heard from a lot of people who are worried not only about the fiscal stability of the state, which is an enormous worry to all of us, but they also care about global issues. And so I think it's time for us to understand the connection between the global and the local. These are people who understand that climate chaos has created ice jams in Haddam. And domestic violence, while not a problem of Essex, touched Essex a couple of years ago very dramatically. When people go to the beautiful Norma Terrace Theater, which is a great adaptive reuse of a building, some of them remember the factory that used to be there that went out of business in the 70s. And while opioid abuse here is no greater than anywhere in the state, there were 24 people who overdosed in the last 5 years in our 4 towns, and that's 24 too many. So when we talk about the beauty and the graceful living that we are privileged to have here, we also need to remember that issues across the board will and do touch us. So while on some level it is still local, it is also global politics. And so I would ask all of you on November 6th to ask who we want to be as a people. Who do we want to be as a region, as a state? So that when we wake up on November 7th, we can ask, did I do the right thing? Are we going to be a state that focuses on the negative, on cuts, on austerity? Or are we going to be a state with a diversified economy full of promise and compassion and hope? I would like very much to be given the chance to prove that we can do the latter. Thank you.
You get a chance to applaud again in a minute.
Thank you. I want to thank you all for attending this debate. I also want to thank Richard Conroy and Tom Piezzo. And if any of you that don't know, Richard is retiring in June, so this will be his last debate. So I want to thank you for your service to the Essex Library. I would also like to thank Christine Palm for agreeing to participate in this debate of the issues that are so important to so many of us here in the 36th District. At the end of the day, I know that we both want to see a state that working people, families, and retirees can all afford to live in and enjoy. I have made it my mission in Hartford these past 2 years to improve the affordability and quality of life in the 4 towns, Chester, Deep River, Essex, and Haddam. I have accomplished a great deal for the citizens here. I worked with DEEP to secure funding to help the town of Haddam build critical infrastructure to provide clean and safe drinking water to hundreds of residents in the Tylerville area. As a member of the Public Safety and Security Committee, I fought to secure upgrades for the Valley Shore 911 emergency communications system. I voted to protect education cost-sharing funds for our 4 towns. This reimbursement prevented our schools from cutting services and staff. I understand that the legislative process needs to consider the needs of all parties in the education system. I co-sponsored legislation to protect another LATAM hand swap deal from happening. I stood up to protect women. I voted in favor of legislation that made pregnancy a qualifying event for women to receive health care coverage. I participated in many drives, including the Essex Stuff a Humvee event for local veterans and school supply for Regions 4 and 17. Politics on the national level are becoming nastier by the day, and I make it a priority of mine to ensure that the rancor and division in Washington does not reach our communities. No matter which cable program we watch when we go to bed, I know when I wake up in the morning, the first thing on my mind is this district, the citizens of Chester, of Deep River, of Essex, and of Haddam. I thank you for the past 2 years being your voice in Hartford, and I hope that I can count on your vote on November 6th. God bless America, and God bless the state of Connecticut.
Thank you both again, and just to remind everyone, we'll be back here again on Monday for the debate between the two state Senate candidates, so come on back. We'll be happy to see you, and have a good evening, and don't forget to vote. Please put the sign down on November 6th. Thank you.